Hey, this is Morgan Pratt with the JayMac for Congress campaign. If you're listening to this podcast, sounds like you like JayMac. You can find out more about him by going to his Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube channel. Please remember to subscribe and rate us. Now coming up, more JayMac.
The number one question I get, and you guys have already asked the question, is why am I running? And why on earth would I leave radio? Because I spent the last 9 years in radio doing my dream job. If you want to understand that, you kind of have to understand how I got into radio and a little bit about me and my history. I was born in Bountiful, Utah, lived in Holiday till I was 6 or 7, and then my family, due to a career change, we moved to Northern California. In Northern California, my family got broken apart. My parents were divorced. I was abandoned. My siblings and I were abandoned at one point. We had to fend for ourselves. I ended up homeless on the streets of Northern California. Dropped out of high school, didn't go to college, and really didn't know what my future was going to be or what it would look like. With help of my oldest brother, he found me on the streets. He pulled me off the streets. Him and his wife sacrificed a great deal to help me get cleaned up. And with that, I started going back to church, and I ended up serving a mission for the LDS Church. I served in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Spanish speaking, with the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans and all of those great people. And then came back home to Utah, where my family had moved, and got married and started pretending to be like an adult. Only I was an adult that had no discipline. I had no parenting, no upbringing. You talk about a wife raising their husband. That's what the situation was, honestly. So I had to take just about any job that was available to me. And usually the jobs that are available to people with my background were restaurant jobs. So I started working in the restaurant business. And everywhere I worked, I would work my way up the ladder very quickly. And I started working at Little Caesars here in Utah. I took over one store. Within 6 months, I had 7 stores. And within about 13, 14 months, I had all 42 stores in Little Caesars. And I just contribute that to the fact that I love to work. I'm a hard worker. I love to work with people. But that was a job, honestly, that stressed me out of my mind. But what I was doing while I was driving around from store to store is I was listening to talk radio. And I was listening to hosts like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. I had never had a political thought in my life. I listened to a local host here, Doug Wright, if you're familiar with Doug Wright. In fact, I used to call Doug Wright on the phone and give him a hard time. And I started to really get interested in our country. I started to really get interested in our history. I started to research it. I started to crave it. I've studied the lives of all of our presidents, and I go back and I do that over and over again. I've studied the founding of this nation. And I think one of the loves that I have for this nation is the fact that I could come from my background and I could actually become something. I could actually, through hard work and effort, the American dream, I could actually work my way up. I was 28 years old and I was running 42 restaurants. I mean, that's America for you, right? That's the dream. And I started to feel like I wanted to do more. Like I wanted to get involved in the public debate. But I was bouncing around, I didn't really like my job at Little Caesars. And one day I came home from work and my wife had been watching Oprah. You remember Oprah? Did you ever watch Oprah? So she's all, Oprah had the answer for you. And I'm like, okay, great. She says, Oprah says you need to find your passion. And if you can do your passion, then you'll never have to work a day in your life. So she looked at me and she said, what is your passion? What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I thought about it and I said, I want to be a talk radio host. Now, I'm a pizza guy. And I just told my wife I want to be a talk radio host. And just to give you an idea about my wife, is she looked at me And she said, okay, how do we do that? She didn't look at me and say, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? How are you going to become a talk show host? And I didn't know either. But I started doing some web searches, and at this time we had moved to Las Vegas. There's a little radio station in Las Vegas that's brokered. Now what that means is if you write them a check, they put you on the air. And it also means that it's all infomercials. It's the colon cleanser followed by the attorney who wants to, if you were in an accident, followed by the doctor who's selling his own prescriptions. But I wrote him a check to go on the radio Friday mornings at 9 a.m. And this was in a radio station in the worst part of town. It was an old rundown house. The microphones and the studio was in the living room. They were doing production in the kitchen and cutting audio in the bathroom. I mean, it was just the worst part of town, and just this rundown radio station. And they literally, without any production help or anything, I just walked in at 9 a.m. I sat down, they turned the microphone on, and I started talking. And from there, I had to go out and sell my own advertising. So I went out and sold a spot to my friend who had a lawn mowing, a lawn care company. I think I sold it for $50, and I went out and sold this advertising. And I was eventually able to sell enough advertising that let me go on the air every day of the week at noon, which, like, I was going to be a daily talk show host. I wasn't really making any money, but I was having an impact. I was saying what I wanted to say and doing what I wanted to do. But I still had to work a day job. And so I went to my boss at the time and I said, I need a little extra time every day at lunchtime to do a talk show host. to do a talk show. And he's like, okay. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, okay, I'll give you the time off, but I'm telling you right now, that dog won't hunt. Now, if you've been to Texas, you know what that means. He was telling me, you're going to fail. You're going to fall on your face. But I did it anyway. So I'd leave my day job every day at noon, and I would do a talk show for an hour, and then I would go back to my day job. And one day I got a phone call just as my funding was about running out. My dream was about over. I got a call from the main program director of the radio station in Vegas that has Rush Limbaugh and has Sean Hannity. And he said, hey, I've got an emergency this weekend on Saturday. Can you fill in for one of our talk show hosts? And I'm like, yeah. So I went in the studio and he said, okay, here's how you turn the phones on. Here's how you turn your microphone on. Have a great show. And walked out the door. And during that broadcast, I was so nervous. When I get nervous, my voice gets really high. And during that broadcast, I had 3 callers call in and say I sounded like the Aflac duck. So it wasn't the best of starts. But he liked what I did. And he gave me a Sunday show. And that Sunday show eventually turned into a Saturday Sunday show. And from there, I was hired and recruited to go to Dallas, where I was officially paid and employed as a talk show host to do 9 to noon. And it was a show where I could, if I wanted to talk to the governor, I told my producers, get the governor on. If I wanted to talk to state legislators, I could talk to them. And I was suddenly having an impact and living my dream, right? I had literally done what Oprah had said. And I had gone from Mr. Pizza Guy to being a talk show host. And from there, I was recruited by KSL to come out and do a talk show here. And that was 9 years ago that I came to KSL. And it was funny because growing up, I was the guy in the car driving around Salt Lake City, calling Doug Wright, who was still on the air at the time when I came back. And it was just this fulfillment of this dream. And the reason I share that with you is to give you a little bit of insight into me and my background. But also, I mean, where else is that going to happen? Where else but in this country is that going to happen? And can that happen? So my love for this country and it really stems from who I am and my upbringing and this process that I could actually do this. And I was talking to legislators and I was having an impact on the public debate. We were having town halls and having these huge discussions about the most important issues of the day. And I was so happy. But about 3 years ago, something started to change. And I started to feel, after 20 years on radio, that I was being a little bit of an armchair quarterback. Do you know what I mean? Everybody can go back and look at that play and say, oh, you should have done this and you should have done that. And trust me, I was very good at it. Saying, oh, you should have, It's one thing to talk about it. It's another to get in and do it. But the other thing that started to change is I used to be able to go on the air and have debates with people. And fierce debates about what we believe, but never name-calling, never attacking. And we would walk away from each other having greater respect for each other. And I did this on the radio for years with callers and representatives. But over the last 3 or 4 years, suddenly I can't get people to debate me. They wouldn't do it because all they would want to do is attack. And it's suddenly our entire dialogue in this nation has gone from respectful disagreement to visceral character assassination. And that scares me to death because the foundation of representation is the recognition that we will not all agree. If we would all agree, you don't need representation. Representation is there because you want every person to be able to express their thoughts and how they feel. And they can send a representative, and that representative represents them, even if they don't represent your viewpoint. And one of the most impactful moments for me is I read George Washington's farewell address. Have you read it? He pleads with the American people as he leaves office voluntarily to never view other Americans as anything less than Americans. He said the minute that we start looking at them as a partisan, a division because they live in a different place, a religious separation, or something else, that's the moment we've lost patriotism. He taught that patriotism, true patriotism, is viewing each other in our disagreements with the highest level of respect. But over the past few years, we've started saying, you're a great American if you agree with me. If you disagree with me, you're not a great American. You have an ulterior motive and you must hate this country. And it's become so dangerous in our society. I happen to believe that one of the best things that can happen to this country is disagreement. And that may sound strange, but I believe that disagreement has a centering effect. And we know this in business. Like when you get together and you want a brainstorming meeting, you don't want all of one side. You want all the ideas. You want a little friction there. You want the pull of different ideas. And I believe that when you have a far right and a far left and they're disagreeing with each other and you're forced to compromise, the centering effect of that is powerful, and it keeps our nation on a steady course, and it satisfies the broadest number of people. But there are those in this country that feel that the best thing to do is somehow eliminate that disagreement. And I don't know how you do it. That sounds like a different form of government to me, where somehow you've overcome and eliminated a complete side of the argument. And now one side is controlling everything. That sounds to me like a boat that goes into circles. There's no centering effect of that. So I cherish disagreement. Disagreement has made me a better person. I think it's made our country a better person. But we're now choosing representatives who don't know how to disagree. And they don't know how to come to conclusions. It's my way or the highway. What's crazy about my way or the highway is that neither side ever gets what they want. The only chance we have of ever getting anything we want is if we somehow meet in the middle and try and push things in one way or the other. So we actually think we're getting more of what we want by digging our feet in. We're actually guaranteeing we're going to get nothing. Nothing. Because we don't know how to disagree with each other anymore. Well, for 20 years, I've been fighting for my beliefs fiercely on the radio. I've never called a person a name in my life, on the radio at least. Maybe as a kid I did. I don't need to, because I can fight for my conservative values with facts, with figures, with ideas. I can articulate a clear message. And the last thing I'll share with you is that the reason why that is so important is because I believe that conservatism, unlike liberalism, I believe conservatism requires conversion. In other words, young people, they understand tax the wealthy, give me free stuff, right? They understand that. Free stuff from the government, free student loans, free college, they understand that. The philosophy of teach them how to fish instead of giving them a fish, the philosophy of conservatism, that takes somebody to articulate that message. Somebody has got to explain to young people why conservatism is of value. But there is nobody in the elected sphere on the Republican side of the aisle right now that is in the business of changing hearts and minds. And what is scary about that is if you look at the number of people in our country who self-identify as conservatives, it's at the lowest number ever. It's at its absolute lowest. And I think that's because we've lost an important business principle, and that is that if you're not growing, you're dying. And we're not expanding our base. We've adopted the policies of the other side. We're attacking, we're cutting. And nobody is going to come in the tent from that type of behavior. We're not going to recruit people with that kind of behavior. You know, a lot of people think that when you're debating somebody, the goal is to make that person look bad. To me, that's never the goal. The goal is, what are all the people who are watching that? What are they thinking? And in my debate of that person, can I change their hearts and minds? I'm never going to change another person's heart and mind with a visceral character assassination. It will never happen. So I believe that if we're going to protect conservatism, that we have to choose leaders who are willing to get in there, to use the bully pulpit and fight for their beliefs and change hearts and minds. If we don't do that, I believe conservatism dies. That's why I left my job. That's why I left my dream job. So there's got to be elected people who are willing to change hearts and minds. Now, I may be naive, but I believe that when somebody gets in there who can do this, who when their values are attacked, instead of them clawing their way out, they reason their way out, I think that there will be a snapback in our society. And there will be a huge response to that. I might be naive, but I still believe in the power of one. I still believe that one person can make change. But that person can only make change with people like you. So because of that, I need your voice, I need your vote, and if you have any, I need your money. Because those are the three things that it takes to win an election. So you've taken the first step, and that's coming out to listen to me. Hopefully I can encourage you to take the next steps as well. And that's what I'd like you to know about me. My name is Jay Mcfarland, and that's why I'm running for Congress. Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the JayMac podcast. If you'd like to donate to JayMac for Congress, you can go to jaymacforutah.com. That's jaymacforutah.com.